Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World. And some of you may wonder why I'm continuing to speak of these episodes as Unpacking Easter, given that Easter was last Sunday. Well, ecclesiastically, the Easter season continues after Easter. It continues all the way to Pentecost. And Pentecost is 50 days, more or less. We'll have to go into the mathematics of that at some point later. But the Easter season, it continues from now until Pentecost. And the first week after Easter is usually called White Week in the high liturgical tradition, because it's the week when both newly baptized members of the congregation historically wore white, and also that the clergy wear some form of white, whether it be in their stole or in their vestments of some sort. So this is White Week, and we're coming up to a very important Sunday, so let's get into it. Generally speaking, when you're a pastor, you get used to highs and lows, not only in the church tradition, but also in the numbers of people in the church. And so, like, maybe you'll get a packed church on Christmas Eve for a candlelight service, and certainly you'll get a packed church on Easter Sunday, unless you've got a really tiny congregation. But generally speaking, Easter Sunday is the big Sunday, because Easter is the crowning event of Christian theology. It's to be expected. And one of the things that I would always notice is that on regular Sundays I'd have many, many more women than men in the church. But on Easter Sunday, all the husbands of all the women who came every Sunday would be there, somehow or other proving their credentials as Christians. I don't know. Like, they wouldn't come most Sundays, and I don't know why they didn't come most Sundays, but they did come on Easter Sunday. And then the Sunday that follows it has many names. And I'll get into that in a minute. One of them, for example, is a quite unusual name. It's called Quasimodo Sunday. And that's because the collect of the day for the Sunday after Easter begins Quasimodo, infantes. And Quasimodo is actually two words. We think of it as the name of the bell ringer in Victor Hugo's novel, but it really means quasi, as if, modo, like, or style. So Quasimodo, in the style of, or as if you were, infantes, a little child. That's the beginning of the collect. So it's called Quasimodo Sunday. It's also called Low Sunday quite often. That's the term I usually use. And there's no real good etymological explanation for that. Like, some people think that it might be a corruption of laudes, which means praise, but there's no good reason for that. It's Low Sunday. But in the clergy we call it Low Sunday because it's the Sunday that has the lowest attendance. Whereas Easter is like packed, then the Sunday afterwards is just the really faithful that show up. And so we call it low, in brackets, attendance Sunday. It's also known as Thomas Sunday, and that's really what I want to talk about. Because it's a very important Sunday following Easter Sunday. Now, in the Gospels, certainly in the Synoptics, and particularly in Mark, there are various traditions about what happened on Easter Sunday. And the original version of Mark says just one thing. It says that nobody could go to the tomb after Jesus was buried because it was already getting towards dark on the Sabbath, and they couldn't do anything on the Sabbath. It was forbidden. And it was dark, first of all, on the Friday night when he was buried, and all day Saturday. It was the Sabbath, and so they couldn't go to the tomb. And then when the Sabbath ended with sundown, it was dark again, so they couldn't go to the tomb. So they had to wait until sunrise on the following day, which would be sunrise on Sunday, which is where we have sunrise services on Sunday, because that's when the women, and most important that it was women first, who went to the tomb because they intended to embalm the body. And when they got there, the tomb was empty. And that's where Mark ends. It's the later additions to Mark were not in the first edition, where there are various people who see the risen Jesus and who remark on him and so forth. And that's expanded in the other synoptics, in Luke and in Matthew. So we have all of these tales about people who saw Jesus and who testified to it and so forth. And there are also records in Paul's epistles. Paul himself did not directly, in the same way as the Gospels suggest, testify to the risen Christ. He did say that he saw the risen Christ, but in a vision. But he also, when he went back to Jerusalem, did interview Peter and James and John and many other disciples, all of whom claim to have seen the risen Jesus. So there's that sort of secondary eyewitness account. But Mark himself is annoyingly silent. It's just like the tomb was empty. So where was the body? All it says is that the women, when they saw the tomb was empty, and first of all, the stone had been rolled away. So how did the stone get rolled away, considering that it had to have taken quite a number of men to roll the stone away from the open tomb? And there were guards there. Well, okay. No one has to be naive enough to think that all Roman guards, centurions, whatever, were completely and utterly honest, and that if somebody with a lot of money came along and said, do you mind if you just go off and take a break for about 20 minutes, that they wouldn't do it. I mean, that's always a possibility, and that very rarely gets mentioned. It always seems to be assumed that Roman guards were totally and completely honest all the time and would not be corrupted by bribery or whatever. Well, let's just leave that aside. Not even consider how the stone got rolled away. What happened to the body is also unclear, but what is clear is that the women who came with their spices and embalming fluids and so forth to embalm the body came and found the tomb empty and ran away. And Mark's gospel ends with they were afraid. The end. And then we go from there to all of the stories that are associated with the later Gospels, with Paul's epistles and so forth. All right, well, let's just leave that aside for the moment and talk about the Sunday after Easter. And for this, we need to look at the Gospel of John. Now, again, the Gospel of John is a lot later than the other Gospels and likely not written by John the Apostle, as John, Jesus' disciple, but some other person called John, using oral information, oral history. And he makes this astounding statement that everybody, all the disciples, the 11, because Judas was dead at this point, the 11 gathered in a room with a locked door, and Jesus appeared to them. But when I say 11, I should say 10. Like the first time that this happens, Thomas is not there. And so Thomas says, I'm not going to believe he's resurrected. I'm not going to believe he's alive until I actually see him. I don't believe you. All right, so that's important. That in the early days, there are a lot of people who were skeptical that Jesus was alive because they hadn't seen him, and like the disciples had a vested interest in saying that he was alive. So Thomas, who's not there, says, until I see him, till I put my hand in his side where the sword, where the spear went, and I put my fingers in his the holes in his hand where the nails were, I'm not going to believe it. I'm just going to assume it's some kind of hoax. And then it says a week later, that it says 8 days later, but 8 days in Jewish calculation means a week later. We would say in modern English 7 days later, like Sunday to Sunday, we say 7 days. But it's actually 8 days if you count both the first Sunday and the last Sunday. All right, so it says 8 days later. That means the week after the first Easter Sunday, all of the disciples were gathered together, including Thomas, and the door was locked, and Jesus appeared. And he says to Thomas, okay, here, put your finger in my hand, in the holes in my hand, put your hand in my side where the spear went, and believe. Now this is the part that doesn't get mentioned very often. Thomas doesn't do that. Thomas simply says, my Lord and my Savior. Now, he doesn't actually need the physical evidence to make a statement like that. And Jesus follows him by saying, well, you are blessed because you saw me and believed. Blessed are all of those who have not seen me and believed. And I always, on Sundays, on Low Sunday, which is also called Thomas Sunday in many traditions, particularly in the Eastern tradition, I often preach sermons about that kind of faith, about the faith that doesn't require physical evidence. Now, I'm not going to start getting into science versus religion and how science requires physical evidence whereas religion doesn't and so forth. Like, I understand all that, I understand. I'm talking about my role as a pastor and how I was evoking a concept of faith on this Sunday. Now, Thomas actually ends up being a somewhat remarkable legendary apostle because outside the Bible it's claimed that he went on many evangelizing missions and ended up in India. and the area of India called Kerala, which is on the western side, southwestern coast and interior. There are a lot of churches that claim to have been founded by Thomas. I think 7, I believe. But it's a very heavily Christian / Catholic area of India. And I've certainly met many deacons from that area who have spent time in other parts of the world, including New York, where I was pastor. And the second church that I was pastor of in Stony Point in Rockland County, New York, had a very large Catholic population and had 3 deacons in the church who were from Kerala. They used to rotate between Kerala and New York. So Thomas is a really important figure, but it's the idea of faith that for me was most important. So don't really think of it as Low Sunday so much as Thomas Sunday. And you can take it as you will, and you can take this video as you will. You can think about faith in ways that you want to. What I may talk about more, although I've talked about it certainly enough, is that all worldviews, like all worldviews, have elements of faith in them. All of them. Mathematics requires faith. Physical science requires faith. Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism require faith. The thing is, it's different kinds of faith. But it's all faith. It's all things that cannot be proven empirically. It's just a question of what things you are willing to accept on faith. Are you willing to accept, for example, that numbers exist? Well, for the most part, yes, because it's useful to do that. Well, that's what faith is about. It's about accepting something that you can't prove, but it's useful to you. Right? So for Thomas, faith in Jesus was useful. And it might be useful to you. It might not. It's not my business. And I'm not going to tell you about my faith. It's not your business. What is your business is to tell your friends about my videos, to like, to subscribe, and I will see you on Tuesday, perhaps with another recipe. I'm not sure, because I'm working my way steadily through my Easter cooking and through my freezer, which is still too packed for words. So until then, have a good weekend.